The Uber driver slowed as he turned onto my street, and I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in 11 months. The oak trees were taller than I remembered. The mailbox is still crooked. The same American flag hanging from the Petersons' porch across the way. I'd been rehearsing this moment in my head for weeks, sitting in dusty field hospitals in northern Uganda, listening to generators hum while children slept 3 to a cot. I pictured unlocking my front door, dropping my bag in the foyer, and sleeping for 18 hours straight in the bed I hadn't touched since last September. Then the car crested the small hill, and I saw my driveway. A moving truck. A sign staked in the lawn with the words sold, slashed diagonally across a realtor's smiling face. 2 men in gray jumpsuits carrying a leather armchair I'd bought at an estate sale in Charleston out the front door and heaving it into a roll-off dumpster at the curb. My grandmother's porcelain lamp followed, hitting the metal wall of the dumpster with a sound that cracked something in my chest. On the front steps, my mother and my older sister stood with plastic cups of wine in their hands, watching the demolition of my life like it was a backyard barbecue. Before I tell you what was in the envelope tucked inside my jacket, and why my mother's wine glass slipped out of her hand 40 minutes later and shattered on the slate, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how wide this story carries, because what happened next is the reason I still sleep with the bedroom door locked. The driver glanced at me in the rear view. "Ma'am, this the right address?" "It's the right address," I said. I paid him. I tipped him well. I got out of the car with my duffel bag slung across my body, and I stood on the sidewalk for 10 full seconds, just breathing. You learn to breathe before you make a decision, in places where decisions get people killed. My name is Elena. I'm 31 years old. I'm a trauma surgeon, which means my job is to stay steady when every cell in the room is screaming. I've held a teenager's femoral artery closed with my thumb while 3 interns panicked around me. I've told parents their child didn't survive, and then walked straight into another OR without sitting down. Panic is a thing I gave up a long time ago. It didn't survive residency. So when my mother lifted her cup toward me in a lazy little salute and smiled the way she always smiled when she thought she'd outmaneuvered me, I didn't run up the steps. I didn't shout. I walked. My boots crunched over a broken picture frame on the walkway, the one that used to sit on my nightstand, a photo of me and my grandmother at the lake the summer before she died. The glass was already cracked. One of the movers had stepped on it. My sister noticed me first. She's 4 years older than me, my sister, and she has this way of arranging her face into a performance of pity, even when she's the one holding the knife. "Oh," she said, "you're back early." I'm back on time. My mother cut in before my sister could answer. "Elena, don't make a scene, the neighbors are watching." I glanced behind me. Mr. Peterson was watering his azaleas with a hose he'd clearly already turned off. Mrs. Delaney from 2 doors down had come out to check her mail twice in the last minute. Good. I wanted witnesses. "What's happening to my house?" I asked. My voice was flat. No shake, no rise. My mother laughed. It was a short, bright laugh, the kind she used at church fundraisers when someone said something mildly off color. "Sweetheart, we talked about this." "We never talked about this." "Well, we did, and you weren't listening, because you were busy playing hero in the jungle. Your sister needed help, real help, and we did what families do." My sister looked down at the slate, then back up at me with that same rehearsed softness. "Mom co-signed a loan for me last year, Elena, for the business. You know, the online boutique. It didn't work out the way I thought. I owed some people." "Serious people." "How serious?" $180,000, my mother said, crisp and proud, like she was reading a church budget line. "And interest. They were going to take the cars. They were going to take everything." "So you sold my house?" "We sold the house, yes. It was the only asset we had that made sense." "The house right. Who signed the papers, Mom?" "I did. I had the paperwork. Remember, when you deployed last year, you signed that document at the lawyer's office. You gave me authority." I remembered. Of course I remembered. I'd signed a medical power of attorney and a limited financial document before I left for Uganda because I was going into a conflict zone and because my mother had wept in the kitchen and begged me to make sure my bills could get paid and my mail could get handled if something happened to me. I remembered her hugging me afterward. I remembered her smelling like the lavender hand lotion she'd used for 20 years. I remembered believing her. "You had a limited power of attorney," I said. "For utilities, for mail forwarding, for banking under a specific cap. It was general enough, Elena. The lawyer didn't make a fuss. The buyer didn't make a fuss." "Where's the buyer?" "Inside, doing her final walkthrough." My sister tilted her head toward the open front door. "She's paying cash. She wanted a fast close. She was very motivated. I already knew what kind of buyer that was. An investor. Someone who smelled desperation on the seller and decided to skip a title search to win the auction against herself. The predator always thinks she's hunting. I looked at my sister's wrist. A new watch. Gold. I knew that watch. I'd priced a similar one a year ago when I was thinking of buying something to wear to a conference, and then talked myself out of it because I couldn't justify the cost. My sister had been unemployed officially for 2 years. Nice watch, I said. She flinched. My mother didn't notice. Elena, come inside. Meet her. We can all be civil. There's still some of your things you can take to a storage unit. We got you one for 3 months, prepaid as a courtesy. A courtesy. I almost laughed. I stepped past my mother and walked into my own foyer. The runner I'd bought in Marrakech was rolled up against the wall. The framed diploma from Johns Hopkins was face down on the entry table. The little brass dish where I kept my keys had been emptied into a Ziploc bag and labeled personal effects in my sister's looping handwriting. The buyer was in the kitchen. She was in her late 40s, expensively dressed, with the kind of tan that comes from spending money on it. She had the deed in one hand and a bottle of sparkling water in the other. You must be the daughter, she said, not unkindly, but the way you speak to a problem you expect to solve in under 2 minutes. I'm Miriam. I understand this is emotional. I want to assure you this transaction is fully legal. Your mother produced the power of attorney, the title, the disclosures. My lawyer reviewed everything this morning. Did your lawyer run a title search? She blinked once. I buy and flip. I move fast. My title insurance handles the back end. Your title insurance is going to earn its premium today. Miriam's smile cooled by half a degree. Excuse me? Behind me, in the foyer? My mother had followed me inside. Elena, stop. Don't do this. The money has already been wired. It's done. Let it go. The money's been wired? This morning, $180,000 to your sister's creditors. The rest into the estate account. What was the sale price? Miriam answered before my mother could. $645,000. Cash. Wired to the escrow account on file. Released per the signed authorization. I did the math in my head. 180 to the debt. That left 465. I looked at my mother's face. She was already preparing a speech about responsibility in the future and how she'd been planning to tell me. Mom, where's the 465? Sweetheart, we can talk about that later. Where's the 465? My sister stepped into the kitchen doorway. It's in an account we set up so you wouldn't be tempted to spend it all at once. We, May and Mom. An account in whose name? Silence. In Mom's name? It's safer that way. There it was, the real theft. The house sale was the cover. The real play was $465,000 sitting in an account my mother controlled for my own good to be distributed back to me in whatever dribbles she decided I'd earned. I turned back to Miriam. She was watching this exchange with the kind of attention that told me she'd already started calculating her exposure. Miriam, I said, I'd like you to sit down. I'm fine standing. Please sit down. You paid $645,000 in cash this morning for a property that isn't owned by the person who signed your contract. My mother made a sound behind me. Not a word, just a sound. Miriam's face went very still. The title shows her as signatory under power of attorney for the owner of record. The owner of record on the county deed is a limited liability company called Magnolia Grove Holdings. My mother has never been a member of that LLC. She has never been a manager. She has no authority to sell its assets. Elena, my mother said, and her voice had gone high and thin. What are you talking about? I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and took out the envelope. It was creased from the long flight. I'd carried it through 3 airports. I unfolded the documents inside and laid them on the kitchen island. The Articles of Organization filed 18 months ago with the Secretary of State, the operating agreement naming me as sole member and manager, and the recorded deed transfer from Elena Ruiz, individual, to Magnolia Grove Holdings, LLC, stamped by the County Recorder's Office 2 weeks before I boarded my flight to Kampala. I transferred ownership of this house to an LLC last year, I said. I'm the only member. My mother has no role in it. The power of attorney she signed covers my personal accounts and certain administrative tasks. It does not grant her any authority over assets held by a separate legal entity. Miriam picked up the Articles of Organization. She read them. She picked up the deed transfer. She read that too. I watched the color leave her face in sections, from her forehead down to her jaw. Your mother signed the contract as seller. My mother committed forgery. The signature on your contract represents that she is the authorized agent of Magnolia Grove Holdings. She is not. No document in existence gives her that authority. But the title company, you told me you skipped a formal title search. Your title insurance is going to have questions. So is the FBI, because the wire you sent this morning crossed state lines on fraudulent representations, which makes this wire fraud. Miriam sat down. On a kitchen stool I'd bought in Asheville. She put both hands flat on the island and stared at the documents like she was trying to will them into a different shape. My sister's mouth had opened and closed twice. My mother hadn't moved. Elena, my mother finally said, I'm your mother. You can't. You can't do this. I didn't do anything. You did it. I did it for your sister. She was in trouble. Real trouble. The men she owed were going to... Then she should have gone to the police or to a lawyer or to a credit counselor. Not to my house, not to my name. Miriam had her phone out. She was scrolling, fast, the way you scroll when you're looking for your attorney's number. My sister's voice cut across the kitchen, shriller than before. Elena, listen to me. If you press this, Mom goes to prison. Do you understand that? Our mother. In prison? I understand. You can't mean that. I mean it. My mother's hand came up to her chest. For a second, I thought she was going to clutch her pearls the way she did in church when the sermon got pointed. But instead, she let the wine cup fall. It was plastic, so it didn't shatter, but the red puddled across my kitchen floor in a way that looked, for a moment, medical. Miriam was already on the phone. Yes, hello. I need to report a real estate fraud in progress. No, I'm currently at the property. Yes, the individual who signed the documents is present. 123 Magnolia Lane. My mother turned on me. You did this on purpose. You set this up. You let me sign those papers. I didn't let you do anything. You did it while I was 9,000 miles away pulling shrapnel out of a 14-year-old girl. You knew this would happen and you let it. I didn't know you would do this, Mom. I hoped you wouldn't. I protected myself in case you did. Those are different things. This is betrayal. No, this is you finding out the house wasn't as easy to take as you thought. The sirens started at the end of the block. My mother heard them, and her face did something I'd never seen it do before. It collapsed, not into grief, into calculation. Her eyes darted to my sister, to Miriam, to the open front door where Mr. Peterson was now openly standing on his lawn, holding the hose at his side, forgotten. Elena. Her voice had changed again, sweeter now. The voice from when I was 7 and she wanted me to stop crying before my father came home. Elena, sweetheart, there's still time. We can talk to Miriam. We can work something out. You don't have to let them take me. Mom, I'm your mother, and I'm your daughter. And you sold my home to cover her debts, and then you put the rest of the money in an account where I couldn't reach it. Do you understand what that tells me about what I am to you? She didn't answer. She couldn't, because the answer was in the fact that she'd done it at all. 2 officers came through the front door. They were calm, professional. Miriam met them in the foyer with her stack of documents. I stayed in the kitchen with my mother and my sister, and the puddle of wine slowly spreading toward the baseboard. My mother was cuffed first. She didn't resist. She looked at me the entire time, the whole long walk from the kitchen to the front door, and she didn't say a word. I don't know what I expected her to say. An apology, maybe, or a curse. She gave me neither. She just looked. And in her look, there was no recognition of me as her child. There was only the cold, evaluating stare of a person who had lost a negotiation. I thought it was over. I was wrong. I was about to learn that the person I should have been watching wasn't my mother. My sister blocked me at the doorway as I moved to follow the officers outside. She was holding her phone up between us. On the screen was a draft email addressed to the chief medical officer of my hospital and to the state medical board. I want you to look at this, Elena. I looked. The email claimed I had falsified controlled substance records during my residency. It named dates, drugs, patient IDs. It attached 2 screenshots that looked, at a glance, like pharmacy logs with my signature at the bottom. They weren't real. The fonts were slightly wrong. The patient ID format didn't match our system from 2019. But at a glance, to a board under obligation to investigate any allegation, they were real enough to destroy my career for a year while they ran the review. If you don't tell those officers this was a misunderstanding, my sister said, very quietly, I hit send. You'll be on administrative leave by Monday. Your license will be under review by the end of the month. And when it all gets sorted out, because I'm sure it eventually will, you'll still have a hole in your CV that every credentialing committee in this country will ask about for the rest of your life. I looked at her, my older sister, 4 years older. The one who taught me to French braid. The one who cried at my white coat ceremony. And I laughed. Not loud, not hysterical. Just a short, surprised laugh. The way you laugh when a patient in triage who's been screaming dramatically turns out to have a scraped knee. Send it, I said. She stared. What? Send it, right now. While I'm standing here. Elena. My pharmacy records from residency are on a federal monitoring system. Every controlled substance I've ever signed out has a timestamp, a witness signature, and a drug count reconciliation. The patient IDs you just mocked up don't match the format my hospital used in 2019. That's not an accident you're going to be able to explain to a federal investigator. Those screenshots aren't a threat to me. They're a confession. So please, sister, send the email. Her thumb hovered over the screen. And while you're at it, I want you to know something else. I recorded the last 4 minutes from my pocket, audio only. You just tried to extort a federal employee because my hospital receives federal funding using fabricated medical documents. That's a felony. 2 felonies, actually. 3 if the recording is admissible, which I'm told it is in this state. Her face did something complicated. You're bluffing. I'm a trauma surgeon. I don't bluff about medicine. And I don't bluff about my career. Send it. She didn't send it. She lowered the phone slowly, as if setting it down too fast might make it go off. I took a step around her and walked out onto the porch. Officer, I said. The younger of the 2 turned around. My sister just attempted to extort me using falsified medical documents to coerce me into obstructing your investigation. I have a partial audio recording. She's still holding the phone with the drafted email on it. I'd like to press charges. The older officer looked at my sister. My sister looked at the phone in her hand like it had just grown teeth. She started to speak, stopped, started again, and finally said, it was a joke. It wasn't a joke, and intent isn't a defense for attempted extortion. I hadn't studied law. I'd just spent a lot of time around hospital legal counsel. Turns out, the phrasing sticks. They cuffed her on my porch. Mrs. Delaney didn't even pretend to check her mail this time. Mr. Peterson lowered his hose and just watched, his face a careful mask of the kind of neighborly decorum that keeps suburban streets polite for decades. Miriam came out after them, shaken, still on the phone, with someone who I assumed was her attorney. She paused on the steps and turned to me. My title insurance will handle the recovery. Probably. I still lost the wire on a fraudulent transaction. I'm going to have a bad year. You skipped the title search. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not going to forgive you for this. I'm not asking you to. She walked to her car. Before she got in, she looked back at me once. You set a trap. I made a trust and filed it with the county. That's not a trap. That's paperwork. They walked into paperwork. She drove away. The sound of the squad cars faded at the end of the block. I stood on my porch with a duffel bag still across my body and the evening starting to come down over the oak trees, and I walked back into my house. The movers had left when the police arrived. The foyer was a wreck. The runner was against the wall. The framed diploma was on the entry table. The Ziploc bag of my keys was on the kitchen island. I picked up the bag. I unzipped it. I dumped my keys into the brass dish where they belonged. I went out to the curb, to the dumpster, and I climbed up on the tailgate of the abandoned moving truck and looked down into it. My grandmother's porcelain lamp was broken. A box of my medical school textbooks was soaked because one of the movers had thrown a half-empty water bottle in on top. But at the bottom of the dumpster, in a folder that had fallen open during the toss, was a small leather journal. My grandmother's, the one she'd kept during the last 2 years of her life, which she'd given to me the summer before she died, and which I'd never opened because I couldn't bear to. I climbed down into the dumpster in my travel clothes and I got it out. Inside, in my grandmother's small, neat handwriting, was a sentence on the first page. Elena, don't let them make you smaller. She'd written it a year before she died. She'd been watching, even then, from her hospital bed, with her morphine drip and her clear eyes, as my mother began to recalibrate the family around the more convenient daughter. She'd seen what was coming. She'd warned me, in a book I was too scared to open. I sat down on the front step of my house and I read for a while. The porch light came on automatically at dusk. Mr. Peterson crossed the street and, without saying anything, set a brown paper bag beside me. Inside was a warm casserole and a bottle of water and a note that just said, "Glad you're home, Dr. Ruiz." I cried for about 40 seconds, I think, maybe 60. Then I stopped, because crying has a ceiling for me and I'd hit it. I went back inside. I reset the security codes on the front door, the back door, and the garage. 4 new codes, all different, all written nowhere. The little panel beeped a clean, affirmative beep when the last one was confirmed. I stood in the foyer in the silence of a house that, for the first time in a long time, contained only one person's plans. 6 months later, I got a call from the assistant district attorney. My mother had accepted a plea deal. 5 years for grand larceny, wire fraud, and elder financial exploitation by proxy, reduced from a starting offer of 9, on condition that she cooperate with the investigation into the funds she'd laundered through a cousin's business. My sister, who'd had priors for bad checks that I'd never known about, got 7. The creditors who'd been demanding the 180 turned out to be connected to a sports betting ring the state had been watching for 2 years. Her cooperation on that front took another year off her sentence, which I thought was fair. I didn't want her to rot, I just wanted her stopped. Miriam got most of her money back through her title insurance, as she'd predicted, after about 14 months of litigation. She sent me a Christmas card the 2nd December. It just said, "Still not forgiving you, but good luck." I laughed when I read it and kept it on the fridge. The $465,000, the part my mother had stashed in the account she controlled, was recovered in full, plus interest and penalties. I donated $100,000 of it to the pediatric burn unit at my hospital in my grandmother's name. The rest I put into a real trust, a proper one, with an independent trustee and strict distribution rules. The trustee is a lawyer in another state who has never met my mother and never will. I still live in the house. The lamp couldn't be fixed, but I found a similar one at an estate sale in Charleston, which felt like the right kind of full circle. The runner from Marrakech is back under my feet in the foyer. The brass dish sits by the door, and every night I drop my keys into it, and every morning I pick them up and go save somebody's life, and then I come home. My sister writes me from prison sometimes. Long letters. I read them because I'm her sister, and because I'm not a monster, and because reading them is not the same as answering them. She hasn't heard back from me yet. I haven't decided if she ever will. My mother has tried to call twice. The number is blocked. If you've ever had to become the quiet, careful villain in someone else's version of your life, just so you could keep being the hero of your own, tell me about it below. I want to know you're out there. And if this story reached you at the right moment, pass it on to the person who needs it. Someone is always about to sign the wrong document for the wrong reason. Someone is always about to believe, one more time, that this time family will choose them. Tell them what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are allowed to build the wall before they start throwing the stones. You are allowed to protect yourself in advance. You are allowed to come home, see what they've done, and smile, because the house was never the thing they couldn't take from you. The fortress was always inside.